This is a show that helps you grow your business by figuring out the customer experience one piece at a time. This is Growth Decoded. Hello, fine people of the world. Welcome to the Season 1 finale of Growth Decoded, the show that aims to teach you things about things that improve the customer experience and grow your business. I'm your host, Ernie Santorelli, and we've got a great show for you to close out our first season. Now, at the beginning of this season, we introduced you to Plantasia, who didn't even have a name way back then. Now, back then, both Plantasia here and this show were just a sprout, full of potential. And over the course of the season, as we have grown and gained knowledge, Plantasia has grown and gained height, leaves, stems, roots, and all the other accoutrements that accompany a growing plant. And here Plantasia is today. Boom. And here we are. Now, we might not have the immediately apparent features of growth that Plantasia has, but here's what we do have. We have knowledge of several aspects of the customer experience. Things like marketing software, customer experience automation, marketing automation, sales CRM, landing pages, integrations, abandoned cart, Facebook custom audiences, lookalike audiences, email analytics, and today we'll investigate email subject lines. Now, don't you worry, we'll be back with Season 2 in just a few weeks, and a little later on today, you'll get a sneak peek at some of the topics that we're going to cover throughout next season, topics that you helped us choose from your feedback. So thank you, Grow Team, for your support, for your feedback and suggestions, for your interest in the show. We'd be like week 1 Plantasia without you. Now, throughout this first season, we've encountered a few themes as they pertain to the best practices around these topics that we've covered, how they improve the customer experience, and how they help you grow your business. Now, remember, any business is a good business if you do business, but if you want to do more business, there are a few things that you can start with. First, know your customer. Know them like they're your best friend. Know who they are. Know what they do. Know which problems they have that you can help mitigate, alleviate, or eliminate. Know the questions that they want answers to and know where they go to find answers to those questions. Know how they talk. Know the words that they use. Talk to them the way that they talk. Answer their questions and meet them where they are. Now, this brings us to our second main theme, expectations. Everybody's got them, including and especially your customers. Now, part of knowing your customer is knowing what they expect and managing those expectations. Can you deliver on them, or do they need to be recalibrated? If you can meet and exceed your customers' expectations, then they have a good experience. But if you can't, and you don't tell them why as soon as possible, then you mismanage their expectations and they have a bad experience. Well, the difference? Everything. The average consumer tells around 15 people about a positive or negative experience. Now, that's the difference between having an energized group of people acting as the world's best sales and marketing team for you or against you. And in a world where the average consumer trusts online recommendations as much as personal recommendations, you definitely want them working for you, unless you don't, in which case I'm not sure why you're watching the show, but hey, by all means, do what makes you happy. Not only that, but the majority of consumers will stop doing business with a brand after a single negative experience. Your business processes are made up of what repeats, and it's worth getting the things that repeat right, because those processes are going to drive the way that you communicate with your customers and your potential customers. This is especially true for the customer experience. All right. More on all that in just a few minutes, but first it's time for our segment, The News, in which case we deliver the news. Our first story comes from Salesforce and Slack. That's right. At the end of last year, Salesforce bought Slack and began integrating the two solutions together. And last week, they announced some of the first integrations between the two tools. For sales teams, customer service, marketing, and reporting teams, there are enhanced communication channels, automatic updates, and daily reports delivered to you through Slack from the various other tools in the Salesforce ecosystem. Salesforce also announced their forthcoming digital media network, Salesforce Plus, which will focus on video, and in the words of the company, it will bring the magic of Dreamforce to viewers across the globe with luminary speakers. Now, Colin Fleming, Salesforce's SVP of Global Brand Marketing, says, as a result of the pandemic, we looked at the media landscape, where people are consuming content, and decided the days of white papers in a business-to-business setting were no longer interesting to people. We're staring at a cookieless future. And looking at the consumer world, we reflected on that for Salesforce and asked, why shouldn't we be thinking about this too? Now, as a video show from a tech company, we're pretty interested in this move. And finally, Instagram is getting rid of the swipe up feature and swapping it with a link sticker. Now, this gives IG accounts a bit more control with their stories, while still allowing for you to link to external websites from your stories. Now, there isn't a change to who will gain access to the link sticker, but Instagram says that it's evaluating whether to expand link access to more accounts in the future. So this ultimately means that the phrase swipe up to learn more will soon become obsolete and have to hang on the shelf next to some classic phrases such as be kind, rewind. Please accept this collect call from get off the internet, I need to use the phone. Can you burn me a mix CD? And who could forget the timeless classic, I'll put you in my top 8 on MySpace. And that, my friends, is the news, or some of it. Now, speaking of Instagram and social media, ActiveCampaign has been running a contest to improve your home office space with prizes available, like a standing desk, a MacBook, and a high-quality camera. Now, that contest is concluding today. So, if you have entered and you want to see who's walking away with these prizes, we'll be doing the drawing right after this episode on the ActiveCampaign Instagram Live Growth Decoded After Show. That's a working title. I guess it could also be an acronym. ACILGDIS. On second thought, probably not. Okay, on to today's topic, email subject lines. An email subject line is the headline of your email. It's the first impression, the first battle you must win if you want someone to do something, and your chosen method of inspiring action is electronic mail. You've seen bad ones, you've seen good ones, you've seen some that don't have one at all. Some have emojis, some use your name, some are absolutely ridiculous, and some are in all caps assault that make you feel like you're being yelled at. The questions that we want answers to, or at least some enhanced understanding to, are as follows. When it comes to getting someone to open an email, how important are email subject lines really? How do you write better email subject lines? Are there best practices or proven methods for this? Is there any utility in A/B testing your email subject lines, and if so, how should you do that? To get closer to the bottom of this, we're going to hear from a number of people, starting with Scott Frothingham. Let's meet Scott. Now I am joined by Scott Frothingham. He is the author of Instant Inspiration for Copywriters. He is the founder of FastForward Results, and he is a phenomenal LinkedIn follow for everyone out there. Lots of insight, knowledge bombs about copywriting and all sorts of things in that realm. I get inspired from most of your posts. Scott, I'm thrilled to have you here. Welcome to Growth Decoded.
Thanks, Ernie. Good to be here, and always like to chat with folks like you, and then of course flog my book, which is always an important thing for authors to do.
Oh yes.
You probably want me to start off with a little bit of background on who is this guy?
Yes, please do.
I started out thinking I was a marketing genius, and marketing was my focus. I always wrote my own copy, and then somewhere along the line, I started noticing my copy was better than my marketing acumen, and I was much better at writing copy than I was at the overall marketing thing. So I sort of made a quick about turn and said, now I'm a full-time copywriter. And that's been an area that a craft that I enjoy, that I love. And since that point, I've been much happier in my career.
Oh, well, perfect. It seems like you're the right guy to talk to about today's topic, which is email subject lines. We'll also be hearing from some of our past guests, as well as pulling some insights and hot takes from additional sources. So let's get into it here. How important is the email subject line? Well, according to a study by Invesp in 2021, 69% of email recipients report the emails as spam after reading the subject line. Now, research by Opt-in Monster in 2020 revealed that 33% of email recipients opened emails because of catchy subject lines. A Brilliant study in 2021 showed that 64% make a decision to open emails based on subject lines. And a similar survey by SuperOffice in 2021 reported that 33.9% of recipients open an email because of the subject line. So with 33 to 64% of people making a decision to open an email based on the subject line, that's pretty significant. It's also a pretty big window. So we wanted to get some information. We polled ActiveCampaign employees to see how important subject lines were for them. The results? 63% of respondents said that they mattered a lot. 0% said they mattered a little. 17% said that the sender was the most important factor, and 20% of the respondents said that they're inbox zero people and they open everything. Oh, that's a hot take alert noise, which means it's time for today's first hot take. Now, this one comes from Dave Gerhardt, the Chief Brand Officer at Drift. Let's take a look at what Dave says. The best way to improve email open rates is not tweaking the subject line and testing gimmicks. It's to build a better reputation as a sender. The emails that I look forward to getting, the subject line doesn't matter. It's the sender, not the subject. Well, I know some folks who would agree with Dave, but doesn't this create a chicken or the egg situation? You can't build rapport as a sender if people don't open your emails, and if they don't know who you are, you have to find a way to get them to open your emails. Now, at that point, the subject line is pretty important, right? And what about for new subscribers who may have only just been introduced to you? You've got to win them over a few times before you become a trusted sender, in which case your subject line has to grab some attention for you. Let's see what Scott has to say.
So I guess we'll kind of just start off with how important, in your opinion, is an email subject line? Does it actually matter? Does it have a significant impact on whether or not someone opens the email?
Well, it is without question the second most important thing in your email. And of course, you say, wait, we're doing the show on this. What do you mean second most important? First most important is the sender. The person getting the email, the recipient, will see the sender and make a judgment. I know this person, I trust this person, or I don't know this person, or this looks a little fishy. That's going to be the key thing to get it open. Once that has been established in the recipient's mind, boom, it is the subject line. Is the introduction. Why am I going to open this email? What's in it for me? Why would I bother? Is this interesting? Has it roused my curiosity? Yeah, pretty much no subject line, no open. And then it doesn't matter how brilliant your email is, how great your call to action is. If it's not opened, it's not open, and the subject line is key importance to get that done.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. I mean, it's sort of like caller ID, right? You know, I get a phone call from numbers that I don't recognize, or that name doesn't pop up on my iPhone right away. And there's a large chance that I'm not going to answer the phone and sort of just wait and see if they leave a message, if they call again, you know, whatever the case may be there. And you kind of alluded to this, I think, in your answer. But what is the most important job of a subject line, in your opinion?
Well, Joe Sugarman said it much better than I did. In so many words, he said the purpose of everything in an ad, I'm paraphrasing here, is to get the person to read the ad. And the subject line, like a good headline, is to get your attention and to arouse curiosity and to get you to open that email. Then obviously the rest of the emails to get you to read it and progress you through to a call to action. Now, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Emails do you think you have in your email maybe that aren't opened? 10?
Unopened?
1,000?
So I'm one of the weird people. I'm an inbox zero guy. So
good for you.
I couldn't tell you how many. I've just clicked that little button that says mark as read, just so that it's not bold anymore and I don't have that notification. I'm one of those people. So, I mean, I couldn't tell you, probably thousands.
Yeah, lots of people have a lot of emails in their box. The numbers say that about 120 emails a day is what the average employed person gets.
Wow.
Numbers change, but out of 121 a day, or 120 a day, you got to think that's a crowd. And what is your subject line doing in that crowd to get noticed?
Right.
If somebody's skimming or scanning those, or just looking to hit the mark email as read quickly, what's going to stop that person? What's going to stop you from scanning down and saying, I'll consider opening this?
So Scott also seems to think that the sender is the most important, but that the subject line is the second most important. Your subject line is the headline that gets people to read your email. It's the way you get attention in a crowded inbox. But how do you go about writing a subject line in a way that helps you garner attention? For that, we turn to copywriting expert Eddie Schlaner. He's the founder of verygoodcopy.com and a copywriting consultant for companies like Drift and Help Scout. He was also the lead copywriter at G2. Here's what Eddie has to say about headlines, or for our purposes, subject lines. Don't write another headline before reading this. It's one of the smartest copywriting quotes you'll ever read. No sentence can be effective if it contains facts alone. It must also contain emotion, image, logic, and promise. From copywriter Eugene Schwartz. Eddie says headlines are sentences too, of course. In fact, they're the most important sentences because if you write a bad one, no one will care enough to read the rest of your sentences. If you write a bad headline, you fail. So don't write flat, invisible headlines like white paper on a white desk. Write compelling headlines that contain emotion, image, logic, and promise. Here's how to make it important. 1, emotional. Make it dramatic. Like this famous headline by John Caples. They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, this is one of the most successful headlines of the 20th century, and it's because it tells a story. It dramatizes the claim. It's storytelling. It makes the prospect visualize a clear narrative in as few words as possible that she can relate to and understand. Now that's compelling. Now what about vivid? Make it appeal to the senses, like this headline from the United Fruit Company. Tastes like you just picked it. Sensitizing the claim by making the prospect feel it, smell it, touch it, see it, or hear it will transport the prospect to a moment, consciously or otherwise. Now, this headline is a hungry moment. You've just bitten into a fresh apple, a delicious fresh apple, and you think, I can't wait to take another bite. That's compelling. What about logical? Make it a question. Like this headline. Has this man really discovered the secret to inevitable wealth? In his book, Enlightened Leadership, Ed Oakley writes, nothing redirects people's thinking better than a well-phrased question, and that's true. A good question can be provocative, even profound to a prospect on the cusp of a decision, especially if she has at one point asked herself the same question. Now that is compelling. And finally, hopeful. Make it inspirational, like this classic headline from Rolls-Royce. To the man who is afraid to let his dreams come true. This ad was featured in Julian Watkins' book, The 100 Greatest Advertisements. Despite being run during the Great Depression, it sold more cars than any other Rolls-Royce ad in history. An inspirational headline can challenge any limiting beliefs the prospect might have, forcing her to think deeply and critically about what she wants. Life, after all, is a constant battle between what we want and what others expect of us. It's a perennial fight transcending generations and cultures. Woo! There's some gold in there. Shout out to Eddie, who, like Scott, drops copywriting insights and inspiration like that on LinkedIn daily and for free. Okay, so there are some different ways to write subject lines, but let's hear from Scott on the actual process of writing a subject line.
So it's not the first time that I've heard the comparison of an email subject line to an ad headline be made. And I think, in many ways, they're almost exactly the same thing. And so I've also heard that a headline or a subject line is maybe the most difficult piece of copy to write. So 1, would you agree with that? And then 2, how do you kind of approach writing a subject line? Do you have a process or a strategy for that?
My writing a subject line is very similar to writing a headline because of all the areas we touched on. I go through pretty much a 3 or 4 step process. First thing I've got to do is I got to ask myself, okay, why am I sending the email?
Right.
What do I want to have happen? What is the purpose of this email? So the first one is answer that question, why? Why am I doing this? Second thing I've got to consider before putting pen to paper is who am I talking to? Because like good ads, if you talk to everybody, you're going to reach nobody. If you talk to a specific person or a specific group of people, you can then communicate with them properly and get some reaction. So why am I sending it? Who am I talking to? As I start getting into who, it's what do they care about? So if I've limited my audience to a specific group, what does that group care about? Is there a pain point? Is there something they're stressing for? I sometimes refer to that as the gas. What does this person want to grow, avoid, or solve? Now that I've got that, I've got a pretty good handle to start. Then I take a deep breath and I think about matching the voice of the brand. Because if you're writing for a plastic surgeon, maybe a funny or joke subject line isn't going to be appropriate.
Right.
So the brand voice becomes important. And then I start writing like crazy. I usually write about 20 subject lines. And then after I've written all those, I remind myself that about half of these are going to be read on a mobile device. And so I either get rid of those that I can't shorten to about 7 words or less, or I see what I can do to get them down to 7 words or less. Then, and this will open up a new category. Then I pick the best 3, and then I use those 3 for A/B testing.
Wow. That is a pretty comprehensive strategy. There's a lot of gold in there. That's fantastic. I love those questions that you ask yourself. Specifically, the one about, does this match the brand voice? Because this is something that has come up in multiple episodes that we've covered, is how do you manage or match the expectations of your audience? Because that's sort of what customer experience is really all about. Like, are you setting up the expectations and delivering on them, or are you doing something, acting in a way that completely misses the mark in terms of what your customers or potential customers are expecting from you? So I really like that point. It just seems like that is kind of permeated through all of the different aspects of the customer experience that we've investigated so far. So that is, it's great to hear that it, is part of your process as well. I definitely want to get it. Oh, go ahead.
It also opens up an important part of the relationship of the subject line to the content, which right. is better be a relationship there. Don't get my attention and arouse my curiosity with a subject line, and then I start reading the content and I don't see the relationship between the content and the subject. If I've asked a question, answer the question and answer it quick. If you said, do you feel you're spending too much money on dry cleaning? I don't want to open up and hear about what kind of dry cleaner you are. I want to hear about how you're going to save me money, and I want to hear about it fast.
Right.
All right. So Scott gave us some great best practices when it comes to writing a subject line that's actually going to get opened. So first, ask yourself some questions. 1, why am I sending this email? What's the purpose of it? 2, who am I talking to? Who is my audience? 3, what do they care about? What's the gas, or what do they want to grow, avoid, or solve? How do you match the voice of the brand? And then he writes 20. He picks 3 and then tests them. Now, we're going to get into the testing part in a little bit, but for now, let's stick with the process. Let's look at that first question. Why are you sending? What's the purpose of the email? There are different types of emails, right? We've divided them into 4 main categories. First, there's the announcement, the special offer, the discount. State the announcement, make it fascinating. Your list quality is going to help a lot here, but also be clear about what the announcement is. Don't get too cute or too clever. In copywriting, clarity beats cleverness every time. Then there's number 2, and that's the resource delivery email. Tell people what they need to do. You got to manage their expectations. Things like action required, or resources inside, or confirmation needed. Next, you have the reactive email. Now, these are usually straightforward, but you can make them exciting. Things like an abandoned cart email, recaps from your app's usage. Maybe if your recipient completes an action, like a course, they make a payment or a purchase, and you want to send them a confirmation. And finally, there's the newsletter, the content, the email blast. Now, this is where you have the most freedom and probably what you're most curious about. These 4 buckets have a lot to do with what type of subject line you're going to write. Remember, we have to manage expectations. What is the expectation that you're setting with the subject line? What is the content of the email actually going to deliver? Let's hear it from Scott.
How should the content of the email impact the way that you approach the subject line? And maybe to spin off of that a little bit, how should the type of email impact the way that you write a subject line? Is it transactional? Is it reactionary? Is it information? Is it, the type of email or the type of content? How does that kind of play into the subject line?
Well, when you've decided why you're writing the email, my first question, why am I sending an email? Part of the answer to that is where the customer is on the customer journey.
Right.
And then that determines what the body copy is going to be, what the content is going to be. But once again, it really goes back to they have to relate. How would you feel if I don't know, you bought your favorite kind of chip, and you open the bag, and you love barbecue on the outside of the bag, and you open up it's sour cream and onions? You're going to be disappointed. obviously the interaction has to be there. Often the subject line can come from the conclusion of the body copy. It's often very similar to the CTA, or call to action.
That is a very interesting point.
And now for something completely different, but just for a few moments. We're going to turn our attention to the future, to Growth Decoded Season 2. And you're going to get some quick hit tips on topics that we'll cover more in depth next season from our wonderful guests and co-hosts, Jamie, Tabitha, and Shiv. So without further ado, we will break away from our topic momentarily to give you a quick tip on something different in a segment that we're going to call We Will Break from Our Topic Momentarily to Give You a Quick Tip on Something Different.
Hi everyone, Tabitha here from the education team, and what I want to talk to you about today is effectively managing your pipelines through the CRM and ActiveCampaign. When you start to think about why you'd want to use a CRM, I'm sure a sales process immediately comes to mind. And while you might have one of those, there's so many other things that you can implement into your pipelines within the CRM. Think about the external and internal processes that you're operating day to day. Think about where your customers are at in their journey. Are they being nurtured because they are considering your business and you want them to convert? Have they just made a purchase and converted? Are you simply looking for them to make a download? Are you shipping them a product? There's so many different things that you can do that will help you meet your customers where they're at. And setting up your pipelines to reflect the processes that you're operating will allow you to track to those more successfully. As you define those pipelines, what you're going to be able to do is break them down stage by stage. We talk a lot about at ActiveCampaign how staying organized and implementing a process before you dive into the software is the key to success. This will help you start to break down what your actual stages are and build those organizational factors into your pipelines. As soon as you start building and seeing all of your puzzle pieces coming together, you'll find that all of your pipelines actually meet each other where the other one stops. Your processes will start to unite, and you'll find that your pipeline management has now become successful within the CRM of ActiveCampaign. There's lots of other tools that you can use to stay organized within your CRM, but building blocks of your pipelines and stages will help you get started successfully. Hope to see you soon to talk more about the CRM.
Hello everybody, my name is Shiv and I'm here on ActiveCampaign's education team, here to talk to you about conditional content. Yes, I know all of you were really excited to chat about this, so we're excited to tell you a little bit more. So conditional content is the idea that in a singular email, we can change different elements of that email to be seen by different people. What that means is you don't have to build out 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different emails to make things personalized. You can do that all in one singular email. A great example of this is I used to be a wedding videographer in a past life, and I would, be doing a shoot in Chicago on the streets. Somebody would come up to me and they'd say, "Hey, I'm looking for a videographer for my wedding. I'm looking for a videographer for my birthday, for my live event. I would love to chat more and see if this is something that would work." I'd say, "Yeah, absolutely." I'd bust out a form that was an ActiveCampaign-based form on my phone, and I would say, "Why don't you go ahead and fill this out really quick, and we'll go ahead and sync up sometime this week." What that form would ask is name, where we met, and then it would ask a couple questions based on the event type that you are doing, right? And so it asked about that event type. And so what I can see here is that in this email that would get sent to them, as soon as they hit the submit button on that form, the first block of this email says, "Dear first name," right? Insert first name here. "Dear first name, great meeting you at insert where we met here," right? Added a little bit of personalization to that first block. Everybody saw that block. But after that, you dynamically only saw the block that mattered to you based on what type of event you told me that you're doing on that form. And so here you can see this will only show if what videography services are you looking for equals birthday videography. If you select a birthday, I'm going to go ahead and say, "Hey, it sounds like that birthday party is going to be really fun with a date coming up on insert birthday here. Let's aim to find a time this week to chat further. In the meantime, here's our birthday party pricing." This was different than if somebody said a wedding, in which case I would say, "Hey, congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I'd be honored to chat more about capturing this amazing day with a date coming up on insert wedding day here. Let's aim to find time this week to chat further. And in the meantime, here's more information about our wedding pricing." So conditional content content can save you a ton of time and be incredibly valuable for you. Again, I hope this was valuable for you guys and hope to see you on the next time.
Hey Grow Team, Jamie here to share some tips on how to plan a lead or a contact scoring system. So first, you want to ask yourself, 1, what do you require? This is about the minimum criteria that a lead must pass to become a customer, such as their age or being in a regional service area. 2, who is your target market? Identify the qualities that your market usually possesses and work with marketing and sales to see how to speak to those customers. 3, who is your ideal lead? Identify the characteristics of a perfect customer so those leads can earn a higher score, such as a certain size budget or an upper management decision maker. 4, you want to think about how do your customers behave. You want to work on listing all possible behaviors that a lead can engage in and think about which of these are critical conversion behaviors or behaviors that your leads go through prior to becoming a customer. So for example, email opens, email clicks, replies, social media shares, requests to contact, free trials, etc. 5, you want to decide on a system. If you aren't exactly sure the kind of system you want to create, creating just a straightforward 100-point system is usually the way to go. Then 6, you want to distribute points. So create a maximum value for each category of actions and assign ideal behaviors to each of those actions. And then 7, you're going to refine and tweak your scores. So just iterate and improve over time. And that is how you start building a lead scoring system. So I hope that was helpful. And thanks for joining us, as always, on Growth Decoded.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you to our wonderful Season 1 guest co-hosts. Stay tuned for the full list of topics that we'll be covering next season, in addition to the topics that you just got quick tips on. But back to email subject lines. Scott has talked about curiosity, and for good reason. Curiosity plays into human psychology. It's a phenomenal motivational force to take in action, which means it's a great strategy to employ when coming up with your email subject line. Oh, another alert. And this one comes from Devin Reed, the head of content strategy at Gong, who also shares some great insights on LinkedIn and just started a great newsletter that you can sign up for called the Content Strategy Reader. That's REEDER, like his last name. Let's see what Devin has to say about curiosity. Writing effective email subject lines is a superpower. Here's a quick tip for increasing your open rates. Drive curiosity. He calls it the mystery subject line. Now, the goal is to create curiosity that motivates your reader to open your email by clicking. They hope to solve the curiosity within the body of the email. You're specifically being vague to intrigue the reader. Here's some examples. This can't be right. Reader, what can't be right? I might be wrong. Wrong about what? Does this work for you? Does what work for me? Notice the question mark. It's designed to incite curiosity. But warning, you must deliver on the curiosity you create in the subject line in the body of the email. Otherwise, it feels like a manipulative gimmick to steal attention, aka clickbait. Try it today. Inject some mystery into your subject lines and you'll increase your open rates overnight. Right. Well, Devin's right. Asking a question is one of the best ways to create curiosity, but what are some others? Professor George Lowenstein wrote this paper back in 1994, and in it he outlines the 5 main ways that you can create curiosity. They are: ask a question, start a story but don't finish it, make a statement that's unexpected, imply you have information that they don't, or imply that they have information that they have since forgotten. Now, this last one is infuriating until you figure it out. Seriously, think about all the times that you're watching a show or a movie and you see someone in it that you recognize, but you can't quite remember where you've seen them before. I'm convinced that that feeling is responsible for 95% of the direct web traffic to IMDb. Anyway, Scott and I talked about curiosity as well. Take a listen.
Your opinion on the overall value or quality of a subject line. What, in your opinion, makes a subject line good?
Does it get attention? Does it arouse curiosity? That's all I care about. And if it does that, well, and then obviously that translates to open rate. There are certain things that I will look for and look against, be upset about. For example, if I see an email line that is shouting, has a lot of all caps, an email line that has a lot of exclamation points, those are red flags to me, and I'll say that's not a good one. If I see too much jargon, depending on the target customer, that's that it falls into the this has to be tweaked. What happens a lot with the ones I write, if it's too clever, I sometimes say, "Wow, that's really clever," but I think concise and clear will do the job a little bit more than clever. And guys like me tend to want to get fancy and have fun, where sometimes the question is, do you feel you're paying too much money for auto service? Is probably clear, precise, and talks to a pain point that somebody might have.
So you mentioned curiosity a few times here, and we will cover the 5 curiosity levers, as we like to call them. So, start a story, but don't finish it. Say something unexpected, imply that you have info that they don't, imply that they used to have info that they have since forgotten. And that leads me to the 5th one, which is apparently something that I have forgotten. Are there particular curiosity levers, for lack of a better term, not my term, but that you kind of like to pull? Are there anything, and as it pertains to curiosity, kind of how do you approach that? How do you approach, piquing someone's interest?
Well, first thing is looking at the client or the customer or the person who'll be that this email is targeted to. And once we've focused on that, the decision comes to, are we going to try and tweak a pain point? Are we going to try and tell a story? How are we going to approach this customer? And then the curiosity will arise from that. What are we going to tell this person? What do we want them to have happen? And then based on that, how are we going to get them into it? How are we going to open it? One of the ways, if it's a story, I like one of the ones that you said, the open loop, which is the start a story, but they have to finish it by opening the email. Again, one of those places where you better close that loop right away, or you'll have people bouncing out of that email fast.
Okay, so we've got some great advice and best practices coming through. Think about why you're writing the email, who it's for, what type of email it is, and then try to incorporate some curiosity into it. But what about some other best practices?
Now, you mentioned a couple of the questions that you ask yourself, as well as, how can we build curiosity with the subject line? Are there any other best practices that you like to keep in mind for writing a good subject line?
Yeah, I think I mentioned short.
Right.
And a lot of that is because of how many are open on mobile. Power words. If you're coming up with a if you're looking at that screen and you're a little blank and you're trying to say, how am I going to start? Look for some power words that might help. Words like discover or exclusive. I probably go through to make sure that it's talking to my audience as opposed to talking to everybody. I love questions. I love numbers. Numbers often translate. This goes back to another question you asked. Once you've done a lot of testing, does some of that testing affect the way you write future emails, even for different customers? And yeah, some of the things do. And one of them is consistently a number in a subject line gets good attention and good open rate. So I look for an opportunity in the 20 or so that I write to have at least one that has a number in it.
Oh, keep it short. Most mobile email providers begin to truncate the email subject line after just 60 characters. Use power words and numbers. Numbers tend to jump off the page. They're the next best thing to use if images aren't available. And power words appeal to emotions as well as curiosity. Now, back in our Facebook Custom Audiences episode, we talked with Melissa Love, a business owner out of the UK who specializes in WordPress website design and marketing consulting. Melissa had some great insights and experience with subject lines and determining which words worked. Check it out.
I've now got a lovely marketing manager who's one of the best copywriters I've ever had, and she is phenomenal. Sometimes I read an email, I'm like, did I write that or did she? Like, she's that good. I don't know which one of us it is anymore. So she will often set up a sequence, then I'll go in and kind of change a few things. On a Friday, we have a Friday roundup email, and on a Monday, we have a Monday kind of mindset email, and we have a little competition to see who can get the craziest subject line. Internally, we have a little internal kind of office Slack competition to see who can come up with the most outrageous things.
That's fantastic.
Lines. Yeah.
We actually have an episode coming up on email subject lines. Is there one in particular that stands out in your head as being particularly outrageous?
The one that's our all-time winner that's had the best was "My cat caught a bat," which is a true, and it's in brackets true story. That's right. The one that did work really well. Oh, and Kay and I I'll tell you one that did really well. Anything with the word swipe in. Kay and I did a joint webinar, and the first email out of the gate was want to swipe our whole funnel, our whole email funnel. So that got a great open rate. So an outrageous offer or an outrageous story-based incident are the ones that work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it builds curiosity, right? That's the subject line is the headline, and you got to make them want to read more somehow. And usually that's make it irresistible for them to not click and read into that. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing those.
That's okay. Well, when we first started doing the Friday one, we called it the Friday Fix, and it was called the Friday Fix every week. And I thought, that's great. People will know to look out for it. And then when we started changing it to, crazy stuff, people were like, we saw the open rate shoot up. So we were like, right, no more Friday Fix. That was a terrible idea.
Awesome. Got to keep that in mind. That's great advice for anyone that's sending a newsletter too. That might, there's a certain element that's like, you should have the content be expected, but I think, having the content coming at a certain day or maybe at a certain time might be expected enough, but that varying up the subject line that's a great tip.
You can bookend it. So actually, I think ours actually does say Friday Fix dash whatever crazy thing.
The best subject line: my cat caught a bat. Think about why. It starts a story and it doesn't finish it. It's unexpected. It creates curiosity in the sense that you have no idea what could happen next, so you open it because you have to find out. Melissa also said anything with the word swipe in it tends to perform well. Power words. Now, as time goes on and you keep these things in mind, you'll get better at writing subject lines, but what if you have a few that you really like and you're not sure which one to go with for a given campaign? Or what if you want to learn more about what really resonates with your audience and you want to learn fast? Well, that's where testing can come in. But how do you make that happen? You know what? Someone asked this question in the ActiveCampaign community recently, and you already know that Tim and Molly were on the case. Let's take a listen to our customer evangelist Tim and community manager Molly answer questions from the ActiveCampaign community.
It's been a while. Make summer last at the garden. You can do this, Tim. These are actual subject lines from emails I've received in the past few weeks. You know what? I can do this.
An email is a chance to send relevant, valuable content to your customers. But if your subject line fails, then the rest of your content doesn't even matter.
Hi, I'm Tim from ActiveCampaign.
And I'm Molly from ActiveCampaign. Today we're going to answer a question that asks, is there a way to do subject line split testing for each email within my automation? Yes, there is. Split testing is a great way to determine which subject line is performing best. And trust me, you want the best performing subject line.
Your subject line is a major reason why someone does or does not open your emails. It's the most important part of your email, and it also happens to be the hardest part to write. An effective subject line makes the recipient curious about what's inside the email. This makes them want to open the email and find out more. A great place to begin brainstorming subject lines that work is a subject line generator, like the free one ActiveCampaign provides. This simple tool suggests several subject lines once you choose a category and enter a keyword. These subject lines might be exactly what you're looking for, or they might serve as a jumping off point for further customization.
Personalization is a great way to make your subject lines even more relevant to your contact. You can add personalized data like your customer's first name or even the product that they left in their shopping cart. This makes your subject lines more relevant to your customers and makes them even more likely to open your email. The best way to know if your subject lines are actually working is to test them. You can use ActiveCampaign split testing to accomplish this in either campaigns or automations. When using split tests and automations, you can define the criteria for when you want that split test to end. After a certain number of contacts have split, after a certain date, or you can run the test indefinitely with no expiration.
Create 3 variations of your email, each with a slightly different subject line. Send each variation of your email to a third of your list, and then after a few days, see which variation had the most opens. You can then use the winning subject line for future emails. All right, there we have it. We had a question from our community that we were going to answer, and we did.
Great. There are a few different ways that you can A/B or split test within ActiveCampaign, and we'll show you more on that in just a bit. But first, let's hear what Scott has to say about testing.
I think a lot of people start off, what is this email about? Okay, here's what my subject line is going to be. Maybe they just write it down and then get to the email body and completely forget to come back to it and maybe see if there's another better option. And speaking of other better options, you alluded to this as well. You narrow it down to 3 and then you A/B test. So yes. It's apparent to me that you're a fan of A/B testing. And there are some folks out there who I actually was reading just the other day, a Twitter thread about a guy who thought that A/B testing subject lines was a complete waste of time. So could you talk a little bit about the value of A/B testing subject lines, kind of where you find the value or why you find it to be worthwhile?
Well, the ability to test any kind of advertising or marketing is key. I once had a boss who used to say, it's not what you expect, it's what you inspect. And the reason I'm sold on A/B testing is every time it seems I do A/B testing, the subject line I think is going to kill usually comes in as the least productive and lower performing subject. Those things, it's almost like a personal joke with me where I look at it and say, I love this, it's gonna die. I do think we can research things to death, and I do think we can take it too far. And I do think that when we get excited about, this performed 0.24% better than the last one, take a deep breath. And don't get too far into it. I worry about losing some of the feeling and emotion by over testing. But I do want to see what's working. I also often do that with lead magnets, where I'll send them to a totally separate page. And I'll see that the copy on one page, the headline on one page, the positioning of the call to action button makes a difference. We have to remember we're usually not advertising to ourselves.
Right. Yeah, that's a very important thing to keep in mind, I think. And to the point of the people only writing one subject line, I think that's probably where that falls in, that fallacy where it's like, well, this is going to work for me. I would open this email. Then you kind of just go from there.
Important to remember, you're not sending this email to yourself. Sometimes you can get too close to a campaign or an email and you forget that the people you're emailing don't know all the same things you do or feel the same way. This is called the curse of knowledge, and it's a cognitive bias that occurs when an individual who is communicating with other individuals assumes that they have the background knowledge to understand. Another hot take noise. What's this one? Jacob Sappington, hot take alert. A/B testing campaign subject lines is stupid, full stop. Jacob Sappington coming in with an absolutely blistering take that says testing campaign subject lines is a waste of time. He's not the only one who thinks so. Jen Hayvice, founder of Make Mention Media and author of Finding the Right Message, spent a summer running A/B tests, and the results changed her mind on the entire practice. Here's what she had to say in a blog from Copy Hackers. Jen writes, the upside of reliving losing tests is that we all get to benefit from a teachable moment or someone else had to suffer through. Whether winners or losers, those case studies leave you, or at least leave me, with the sense that testing is the ticket to actionable insights. Develop a hypothesis, craft at least one treatment, implement a test, and start rolling in the hard data. But it's impossible to run a test on a website that has low traffic, low quality traffic, and or low conversions. No surprise, right? Everybody knows that testing takes lots of good old traffic, but testing platforms casually disregard that critical point. How on earth is a non-Amazon business supposed to test everything when you can barely test your homepage headline and reach confidence? Thanks to low traffic, we had to abandon testing on more than one site when our month of experimentation was up. I'm sure I'm not the first person to be frustrated by this. Small growing businesses are super screwed when it comes to testing. A/B testing can feel like you're riding a roller coaster after eating one too many chili cheese dogs. You need to monitor your tests regularly, but not too regularly. You've got to check in to know what's happening with your tests and if they've reached significance, but I quickly learned that checking in daily can get really frustrating. Whoa. Wait, was that a hot take noise? Because that sounded like a wooden crate being dragged on a boardwalk. Do we have another hot take noise? Ah, that's more like it. Can you tell that we're having fun with our sound effects packs? Now, this hot take on testing comes from Joel Kletke, conversion copywriting expert and founder of Case Study Buddy, our featured guest on episode 5 when we investigated landing pages. So let's hear from Joel.
You talked a little bit earlier about testing and kind of pitting two things against each other. Do you advocate for testing, very small things, larger things? Like how should you approach the testing process?
Testing is a crutch for a lot of people. And that might sound funny coming from someone in the conversion space. Like there's always the refrain like, well, A/B test it. And the reality is you probably can't. Most companies probably can't. If you're not doing thousands of visitors and hundreds of transactions over a very tight time period, hitting statistical significance can be impossible, very hard. That doesn't mean though that you shouldn't test at all. The less, I would say, the amount you test is kind of determined by two things. Like you can tweak small things. Let's call some things tweaks and some things big tests. I think every company should take bet wild swings against each other, like two totally different concepts, two totally different angles, a really short version versus a really long version. Those types of tests, I think, make sense for most companies because it gives you something like very tangible to zero in on. Like, okay, clearly all other things being equal, this angle resonated more than that one, or the long copy had information in it that was critical to the decision where the short copy didn't. I think changing big elements and running even like non-statistically significant, but just like gut level tests, I don't think that's, other people won't say the same thing, but I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. And I think for a lot of companies, that's the only option, is these big swings, big differences, and obvious changes between the two. You can only really test and tweak small stuff when the statistical significance is there, where you can rule out all other factors like seasonality and that kind of thing. Testing is hard to do well. It requires a lot of transactions and people. And so I would say, like, once you've got a page that's been up for a while, as maybe a smaller company, then you can tweak stuff, you can try stuff out, but don't just like, I think there's this tendency to just, it's like a what if hypothesis where it's like, what if we did this? There should be not just like a trigger happy, like, what if we tried that out? There should be a good rationale for whatever it is you decide you want to test. So it's not just like, would a big button convert better? That's not a good hypothesis. A good hypothesis is, we think people are missing the button, or we think the button is blending in too much. So we will test a larger, different colored button and see if that impacts conversions. But you should have some data behind why you want to test the things that you do. You should have a well-formed hypothesis beyond what if we tried that. And I think that's kind of, for the average company and the average person, that's a far saner way to go about it than like, did changing that word in my headline raise conversions? We see those case studies and we want that for ourselves, but the reality is you're not Nike, you're not, HubSpot. Like, you probably don't have the bandwidth to change this like small level stuff to a point you can be super confident in it. But that's just my take. There's people who would disagree with that.
So Joel shares similar sentiments as Jen. Testing is hard without a lot of traffic, but that's not to say that testing isn't worthwhile. Okay, but what does Scott have to say here?
And the argument that was interesting in that Twitter thread that I mentioned earlier was that for any given one-off email campaign, email send, what are you going to do with the results of the A/B test? You found out that this subject line might be significantly better in terms of opens than this subject line. Are you using the results of those tests to sort of influence the subject lines that you write in the future? Are they part of, automations where you pick a winner and then that subject line kind of wins out in the automation and stays as the subject line for anyone who might come into the automation? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. That's all those things. You find that certain groups of people respond to different things. If you search online, should I put an emoji in my email subject line? I haven't done that, but I'm guessing you'll get hundreds of responses, and some will say, always put emojis in your email subject line. 26% better when emojis are in email subject line. Should you personalize? Oh yes, you got to put the name, or never put the name. The point is, those are all good guidelines. And if you are sending enough emails on one particular subject for one particular client, you can test that, and you can find out that your audience has a tendency to respond to having it personalized, having an emoji in there. So the answer isn't yes, always include an emoji. It's when you're talking for this particular client, emojis seem to get better opens. Now, if I'm a really good research guy, I'd be able to tell you why they get better opens. I don't know. A lot of it is you take your best guess, you see what performs, you do that, then you test that one against other things, and you start finding out that one style, one particular type or technique impacts that audience a little better than others.
Gotcha. So in the case where it's not, a one-off email campaign, but it might be something where or in the case of a landing page, you're thinking about picking a winner that's going to stay. You're going to choose it. It's going to go that way, and it's going to stay that way for a given amount of time. How long do you let those tests run for before you're able to say, this option A clearly beats out option B and option C?
It depends on the size of the list and the frequency of emailing. There are some smaller clients who it's it might take a year to just start coming up with things like, okay, we seem to get better response when we personalize it. There are other folks, and you get pretty instant results when you're talking about email, just like in social media. So you can make some adjustments a lot faster than in the old days when you were running full page newspaper ads and had 50% of your budget on TV. You couldn't make those adjustments.
Right.
You can. So it really, a lot of these answers come down to, it depends on the client. One of the tough things to do is if, for example, you have a welcome email sequence for onboarding, and your first one does very well, but usually the first email you send in a welcome email sequence is usually the best response you're going to get out of any email you ever send. So you send it and you really like how it performs. And then you start thinking, well, should I mess with this? Should I take a chance? This is working. And once again, it depends on the size of the customer and the number of emails where you can afford to do a little testing.
Okay, so some tests might take a year or more. And the idea is always to be better than you were last time. You'll have more information, more ideas about what works and what doesn't. And to Scott's point, you never truly know what's going to work until you try it. But how do you go about selecting a winner?
So one more question about testing here. What size discrepancy in the results are you looking for, or would be enough evidence for you to say, okay, this is a clear winner versus, there really isn't any significant difference?
Well, that, once again, I'm not a research expert, and I'm sure that there are viewers you have who are, that'll cringe when I say it. I sort of do it by gut. I look at the number that we sent out. I look at the response they get to other emails, and I say, wow, for this guy, 10, 12%, that is huge difference. Let's stick with it. If it's a little closer, I might test it again just to see what the range of acceptability is going to be. I don't have a strong enough research background to give you a hard and fast answer there. So I just have to tell you that I do it. It's a little bit squishy the way the way I do it, and it seems to work. And one of these days, I'll probably get aligned with a research guru who can show me how to tweak an extra percent here and an extra percent there. But until then, just me, and my gut.
Well, I mean, I think that is a very similar and shared experience for most of the people that are watching, right? You know, you don't have the resources or the bandwidth to really go in depth on the research. If you're running an A/B test, one, it's enough to, or it's a lot to even get to a point where you start thinking about A/B testing, writing enough subject lines to A/B test, setting that up, actually running it and looking at the results. So having a research, analyst is probably outside the realm of possibility for a lot of people. And I think that's exactly right. 10 to 12%, that could be huge. That's pretty significant.
Okay, so Scott knows it when he sees it, which reminds me of a conversation that I had with Jonathan Young, the e-commerce manager of a video game apparel company called Jinx. Jonathan and I spoke about testing emails as well. So let's take a look back at what Jonathan had to say.
So how often do you revisit the automation? How often do you test or kind of try to improve it?
Constantly.
Okay.
Constantly. So I know a lot of people, and I was kind of this way, is like, oh, I don't want to test. That just seems daunting.
Right.
And it's not, I don't really see it as a test. I see it as a tweak.
Do you do any experimentation or tweaking, with the subject line or the actual content, like body copy of the email, the writing, anything like that?
We tweaked. I think we got recommended by our Megan, our account rep, on trying emojis.
Oh, okay.
So we tried little emojis in there. Didn't get that big of a response out of it. Nothing measurable.
Okay.
I thought it was cute, but nothing really measurable. So we tried that in the subject lines. We're going to switch out. Our next test is going to be the copy, because it's very our email design mimics the Shopify. What do we call them? Transactional emails.
Okay.
So when you get an email from Shopify, it says your order's been placed, your order's been shipped, and so it matches that.
Right.
And then our other email marketing is very fancy and artsy and whatnot. And so we're going to make this a little bit fancier. Is our next one, a little bit cuter, and that's going to be our next one. Is getting a little fun and silly and crazy.
Yeah, get that brand voice in there
with the copy. So I mean, it's cute, but we're still gonna. I mean, we're getting good results out of it right now, but we want to see, can we get better results?
Right.
If it would be a little bit more silly.
So with all of these tweaks, these tests that you're running, how long do you let the test run before you determine if you're going to, implement the change or keep it the way that it was?
Until I get good enough. Well, it kind of depends.
Okay.
Sometimes I see a difference right away, but I don't have enough. I want to see enough people in the numbers. Right. Like I may run it for 2 weeks, but there's not enough people in the queue yet. Like I may run it for 2 weeks and I'll see, oh, this one's only got 10%, and this one's got 80%. But there's there's not enough people in that queue. And so I'll run it for another couple of weeks to see how it runs. Or I may run it for 2 weeks and there's 5 bazillion people in that queue and there's no results. So, it just kind of depends. I want to hit that sweet spot of there's enough people in that queue. And I also see a good result out of it. And if there's a lot of people in there and I see no result, then okay, no change. I just pick A or B, whichever one I think is good.
Sure.
That's just my decision.
So it's like you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Testing your email subject lines can certainly help you discover what styles resonate with your audience. Are they more serious and straightforward? Can you get a little silly? Do numbers have an impact? Do questions work better than statements? Which curiosity levers work the best? Now, you can discover all these things as you go, whether you test or not, by paying close attention to the subject line style and the corresponding results. So keep these things in mind when you're looking to write a better subject line. First, ask yourself, again, what's the purpose of the email? Why are you sending it? Who is it for? What do they care about? And finally, how can you match the voice of the brand? Now, once you have the answers to those questions, see if you can't pull some curiosity levers. Is there a place for a number? What about a powerful, captivating word? And as Scott advocated for, write the subject line last and write a bunch of them. You can narrow it down, or maybe you can use a few of them to Frankenstein a super subject line together. But what should you avoid?
Are there any mistakes that you see often in your inbox, or mistakes that you have made personally that we might be able to learn from?
Me? Mistakes? What, are you kidding? What is wrong with you? That's one of the reasons I test is to see what mistakes I've made. They aren't always like I say, some of the ones that I predict are going to be the killers turn out to be the lowest testing ones. I think we've covered some of the mistakes. We've talked about things like all caps, things that sound spammy.
Right.
I think what you're trying to do is open up a conversation with either a current customer or a prospective customer. And if you sound like an infomercial that offers free leaders and gutters, and it's not going to create a conversation. So I see a lot of email subject lines that are either too shouty, too spammy, too marketing lingo, ease. There are some guys, Uber, they have subject lines that say things like 50% coupon on your next 3 meals. Okay, that's pretty much if I were going to call you and say, hey, guess what? I saw that Uber has 50% off its next 3 meals. That's a pretty natural thing to say. Those folks who get into heavy advertising speak, I think, create a barrier that doesn't make it easy to open a conversation. Sometimes simple and clear and concise wins the day.
Well, there you have it. Avoid spammy words like free or fast cash or don't delete. Don't include multiple exclamation points, and make sure your caps lock button isn't on. Aha, the final hot take of the episode, and this one comes from Scott himself. Let's see here.
And finally, here's the last question. We've kind of talked about some of the hot takes. You should always include an emoji in your subject line. You should, all the different advice that you might see, or the subject line doesn't matter at all. It's more about what's in the email, or it's more about who it's coming from. Do you have any, what they would call hot takes regarding email subject lines?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I do. All the above, and you know me, I could go on for hours and come up with more stuff. But the one thing that I see people don't do enough, and I think is important to think about, is think about your preview text or your pre-header. I know that's not necessarily part of the subject line, but don't repeat the subject line in that preview text or a pre-header. Extend it, use that, so it continues and makes the email seem that much more worthy of being opened. You usually do have enough characters to take it to the next level. Too many times I see people repeating the subject line there, and that's just a wasted opportunity.
Great advice to close us out. The pre-header text can be a subject line extension, or a second subject line that you can use to pack as much info as you can in. Your pre-header is especially useful on mobile, as it's much more prominent than it is in a desktop inbox. Now, we've covered a lot here, and one thing that's tough to do is A/B testing. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be. And with tools like ActiveCampaign, you can automate it. How? Well, let's find out and automate that. Welcome to the season finale installment of Automate That. Cody, good to see you.
Good to see you too, pal.
How have you been doing?
Been doing pretty good. Can't complain. How about you, man?
I'm doing great. I am very excited to do this episode. Kind of amazed that this is the 10th episode we've done this season, plus the 6 that we've done before. I think we've done 16 of these.
Sweet 16. Someone buy me a car.
I'm not going to do that, but if somebody wanted to, I would support it. Okay, let's move into this. Again, it's Automate That. It's Cody. It's me. It's the automation recipe of the week. Cody, can you please give us a drum roll?
Boom, 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 boom.
Wow, season finale drum roll did not disappoint at all. The automation recipe of the week for the email subject lines episode is determine the best sales email subject line. Cody, take it away.
Oh, we got them back of the baseball card stats for you. First of all, any industry can use this. If you're selling something, use this to determine the best way to sell it. Features, split action, email, and goals. Use cases, sales. Experience level, growth. Again, we always like to point out, it doesn't mean the automation is hard to set up. It usually just requires work ahead of time. For instance, you want to make sure you know how you're splitting the contacts, and you want to make sure how your different series are going to differ from each other. That's a little bit easier to do before you go in and start importing this. And of course, stage of the journey, convert and close.
Yes. And as you can see here in this little preview image on the right, Cody, like we said, we've done 16 of these, but I do think that this is the first one that has a split action in it. Is that right?
I do believe so. It's our first split action. Great awesome. To split from season 1 to season 2.
Wow. That was pretty good. I'll give that
Thanks.
to you.
Hey,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we're thinking about what this recipe lets us do, what are we looking at?
Well, it allows you to compare 2 or more different sales email series, determine which is better based on sales-driven results, which let me pause there for a second, Ernie, because I want to point out how much I love that. So yes, you can determine the winner yourself, but the beautiful thing about using our split action, you determine the condition with which they choose a winner. Our default is a purchase being made. You could set it to links being clicked for your product page, that site being visited, and we'll go through those in a bit, but that's the thing. You're not having to guess. The one that wins is the one that has the proof behind it, which is huge. As this also says, we have 2 in our example, but you can always build out another split action and send people down a third pathway. Know which sales drip campaign emails resonate with the audience, lead to higher conversions. This is perfect because you can compare everything from, as our focus is today, email subject lines to the content to everything. This really lets you know what your customer base responds to, which ties directly into our third point, improve your messaging and develop your sales lead nurturing email campaigns, which, we put this here and it's very true, but I like to think of it as discover your brand, discover your voice, discover how often you email, discover what works for you and your customer base as you get new leads, as old leads come back, all sorts of great things.
Yeah, absolutely. As we've talked about throughout the content of this episode, trying to figure out and really nail down who your audience is, the type of messaging that they like, the type of messaging that resonates with them more and ends up getting you that open, that click, that action rate. This automation recipe is going to help you test more than one thing at a time. So that is certainly great. If we're going to the automation store, wow, we have a long list of ingredients here. What are we looking at here?
We got a lot to pick up today. We're going to take a subscribes to list trigger, a split action, 6 send email actions. Again, this is fully customizable. That could be more for you. 4 wait steps. Again, could be more. 2 goal steps, 2 tag actions.
This recipe really does. This is like a Sunday night family dinner type recipe. We've got all kinds of things going on here. We've got adding to list, we've got segmentation, we've got goals, we've got wait steps, we've got emails, we've got split actions. We are showing off a little bit with this recipe, showing off the skills in the automation kitchen, if you will.
It's what I call charcuterie automations, man. I just made that up right now, but I'm going to call automations like this charcuterie automations, a little bit of everything.
I enjoy that. I like that. I support that. We've got the ingredients home. We're putting them on the counter. We
have to get our mise en place. What do we got to do first?
So before we start importing this automation, you want to set up, if you're going to use the default sell is made, condition, you want to set up that e-commerce integration. Now, again, if you're thinking, I don't really use Shopify or WooCommerce, one of the integrations that ActiveCampaign has, you can always use site tracking or links click to get an idea of at least interested parties. Or like we've said, maybe that conversion event isn't a sell. Maybe it's a marketing related conversion. You can still use this recipe and track the wanted conversion, but make sure your conversion is set up, is what this first point is basically saying. 2, determine how the sales drip differ. As we've talked about before too, is it only the content that changes? Are there different promos or offers going on? Is the timing different? Is it an entirely different look? Or for our focus today, is the email subject lines, how different are they? Is it just rewording? Is it a completely different vibe? And one thing I always like to call out too, you can make it as small as the from name and the from address, because those people will respond differently too, and you can get an idea of who these emails should be from.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and it's something that we have talked about throughout the testing portion of this episode in Growth Decoded as well. Is just, if you're going to test, some people recommend making small tests. Some people recommend making full scale, large changes, whether it's make the entire drip with images or without images, or one very long detailed version and one very short to the point version. To your point, who is the email coming from? What style is the subject line? Anything that you want to test, you're going to want to figure out that beforehand, because if you kind of get in here trying to figure out what you're going to test when you're setting up the automation, the odds that you have a successful test that yields any sort of actionable results for you are going to go down. So it's really to your benefit to figure out exactly what you want to test in that split before you get this automation going in your account. So with all that said, now that we've got our mise en place, we've got our ingredients ready, let's take a look at this thing. Okay, Cody, it's long. It's a little intimidating. I'm not going to lie to you. Can you set us at ease here? What are we looking at?
Yes, it's actually going to be super easy. Think of it as 2 actions and then a mirror of a drip series. So the very first thing is going to be that trigger. When someone subscribes to your list, or you can use any trigger, submit your form, however you want to kick this off, then they'll enter the automation. They'll then be split. This is a moment I like to talk about. You will set how the split works on this action. So if you want to choose manually, you can set it to run indefinitely and just use your own kind of reporting. If you want it to decide for you, like we have 300 contacts run through it, with whichever of the contacts buys more products, that's the winner for us. But that's where you're going to set up those conditions, how you want to split it. As you pointed out, Ernie, you can also do a date-based split so that you send one and then you split based on that date. But then once they're split, they're going to go into the 2 different drips. It's going to be one email, then a wait, which could differ, as we've said. Maybe you're testing out timing. That second email in the series, the third wait or second wait, and then the third email. Now you can track and keep a wait there if you want to really use that goal to do manual tracking. But if contacts leave the automation and then they buy after that third email, the split action will track that. But then we got our goals, because as we know, if someone makes a purchase or if someone takes your conversion action, you don't want to send them 2 more emails saying, hey, we'd really love for you to do that thing. So that goal helps us by taking the contacts out of their respective flows, sending them to the bottom and letting them exit, but not before they are tagged. This is something I like to do. It helps make manual reporting easier, or when you're going through the system, just trying to figure out which contacts did something or not. Made a purchase, flow A, made a purchase, flow B. That's what those tags are on the bottom. Contacts who did not make a purchase, we have the goal set up that they exit the automation at the goal step. So don't worry, not everyone will get a tag that says they made a purchase if they didn't. But yeah, I mean, it is a lot, I'm not gonna lie, but it's a lot that helps save you time and really help you figure out what direction you want to take your sales in.
Right. And I think you did a great job of saying, it is basically just 2 actions and then 2 separate automations running under the same umbrella. And then eventually, one automation is going to win out based on whatever the conversion data is that you get from those automations. And there's so many steps here. Just to point out, we love to call it the salt to taste, which is, change this automation and make it more specific to your business and your processes, right? Any of those wait steps can change. You can add emails if you wanted to do 5 emails instead of 3. You can change the wait steps, like I said, from a day to 2 days to a week to whatever makes sense for you. Add emails in, subtract emails in, and then also change the way that the winner is selected from that split test. So lots of different ways for you to customize. This is, again, just a framework to give you an idea. If you had a use case in mind, you wanted to know how you could automate it, this is how you would do it. But again, set it up to fit your business's unique requirements and needs. So Cody, based on this, we've got some related recipes here. What are we looking at?
Well, the big thing we wanted to do was, if you are doing any sort of sales, even if you're not an e-commerce business, you should probably also be running these 3 recipes. If you're thinking, I'm using this more for marketing purposes, and you guys have been talking about that, you can actually take the word purchase in the last 2 and almost just change it to conversion, because you can change the triggers, you can change the conditions, you can set it to track whatever conversion you're looking for. Maybe they're signing up for a membership list, maybe something like that. But I'll go through them now. First of all, abandoned cart reminder. We've gone over this one on Automate That before, and we've also gone on a couple of other abandoned cart automations as well. But the gist of the idea is, when someone leaves a cart on your site, send them a gentle reminder saying, hey, we noticed that you left this, these deals aren't going to be around forever. Do you want to buy? Second, after purchase follow-up or after conversion follow-up. This one is, just a series of emails that go out after purchase is made. So you might, send a confirmation email early, and then wait 2 weeks, send a check-in, and then wait a couple more weeks and send, hey, we'd love for you to fill out this review. Maybe you're sending instructions. Maybe you're sending accessory upsell emails. However you want to follow up, whatever makes sense, you can do with this. Now, the last one, store customer last purchase date. Some people see this, they're like, why do I want to store that? Well, let's think about with marketing. We tracked last engaged date a lot so that we can know if someone's starting to become less engaged and try to re-engage them. It's very similar, but with sales. We see when the last time someone bought something was. We can build out automations based on if that date gets too far down the cycle, especially if you're someone who there's refills needed, or your product that you sell, you need to, restock up your kitchen there. This is a great one to say, like, hey, we think you're probably running low based on the timing. Don't run out, start buying today, or something like that.
Yeah. I love that point that you made up about just inserting the word conversion in instead of purchase. Again, these are just to give you ideas about the different things that can be automated. So, if you've got a specific email drip content series or whatever it is after somebody signs up and redeems a piece of gated content or attends a webinar, or fill in the blank, like you said with conversion, that second automation is really going to help you send that specific automation sequence, or at least give you the framework to where you could create that for yourself. So these are all great suggestions. Cody, thank you as always. I appreciate it. Season 1 is done. 10 episodes of Automate That, 10 things, 10 questions that we had. How do you automate this? 10 answers. This is how you automate that. And that's that.
Automated. Have a great one, everyone.
And that is it for our show. And that's it for Growth Decoded Season 1. Thank you to Tim and Molly and Cody for their help on this episode and all of the previous episodes in Season 1. Thank you to our wonderful guest co-hosts from Season 1 for giving us a sneak peek into the topics that we're going to cover in Season 2. We are far from done. Season 2 is just a few weeks away. We have so much left to uncover and investigate for you all, so stay tuned for that. Shout out to Dave Gerhardt, to Eddie Schlaner, to Jen Havice, to Jacob Sappington, and to Devin Reed for dishing out the free knowledge regarding subject lines. Thank you to all of our Season 1 guests, but thank you to Melissa Love, Jonathan Young, and Joel Kletke for talking about email subject lines in the previous conversations we had. Thank you to today's guest, Scott Frothingham, for his insights and expertise on writing good email subject lines. Here's Scott's book right here, Instant Inspiration for Copywriters. You can check this out on Amazon if you want to learn more from Scott and get some inspiration for writing better subject lines or just words wherever they appear on the internet for your business. And finally, thank you to you for your support of the show. We are going to go live on ActiveCampaign's Instagram account in just a few minutes here to reveal the winners of the AC Home Office Space Makeover Contest, so get excited for that. Again, keep your eyes out for more information on Growth Decoded Season 2. We've got a lot of great topics. We'll have a lot of great guests, more great content, more questions answered, more best practices uncovered for you, so stay tuned. Until then, this is Plantasia. I'm Ernie. Thanks for watching. Go forth and automate.